everybody. It's Peggy. How is everybody today? You still have snow? I think Idaho has snow. My friend Shanta shows us every morning her driving to work in the snow. We had cold temperatures today, but no snow, so we were able to go to the healing room this morning. But it's beautiful. It's blue sky, but I'd have to get out my electric socks, 2 layers to wear on the bottom, 3 layers on top, a cap and mittens. You'd think I grew up in Michigan. Go figure. I guess I've gotten kind of soft after all these years. My cousins have shown pictures on Facebook of all their snow, and we used to get lake effect snow from Lake Michigan. So weather is definitely a subject that everybody's talking about recently. But today we're going to talk about self-control. And it isn't what some of you may think, excuse me, is self-control, but it's being in his firm grip. So once I was in a situation waiting in an emergency room for hours and hours, very sick. And I lost it. I panicked. And I didn't have self-control. And, I'm very ashamed of how I acted that night years ago. But the thing is, I forgot that I was in his firm grip. I forgot for a little while. And so if we always remember that's where we are, in his firm grip, there's nothing to be afraid of, nothing that can take us out of his grip. So then, of course, we can be controlled. In other words, be in control of our emotions and actions and words. So we learn, don't we, as we go through life. And often we learn after going through something and make some mistakes, and we learn. And we're coming to the end of our book, Mountains of Spices. There's one more chapter after this where she kind of ties everything together. And I've been praying about what book to do next. And there have been 3 or 4 that I've been considering. And I do like allegories. I like it when Jesus spoke in parables. I know he can speak clearly to his people, and he spoke in the Bible clearly to the disciples, but the parables were stories that I think people can relate to, and I certainly can relate to the characters in allegories, which are similar, is what I'm thinking to the parables. Sorry about my throat. Thank you, Lord, for healing me. So there is a book that is the 3rd book in this series. First, there was Hinds Feet on High Places, and you can go back on my Facebook page, or you can go back you can get the International Apostolic Ministries app, and they're all listed on the app, or you can go on YouTube and they're all listed. And Hinds Feet on High Places is my favorite one of all 3. It's the first one, and it really goes deep into our hearts, and it really sets you up for the next 2 books. But then the 3rd book in this series, I don't really want to say too much about it because it'll give away the ending of this book. So, but it's a continuation, I should say, of these previous 2 books. Yes. So we've got a couple of scriptures today. Oh, my voice. It's like I have a frog living in my throat all the time. Go frog. So 1 Samuel 1:16-17 is one of the scriptures. It says, it says, "Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I've been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." So this is when Hannah was praying under her breath, just praying, and she was taken for maybe for being drunk, and she wasn't. She was praying from her heart. Now, that's one of the scriptures, is praying after God's heart. The next one is Proverbs 3:5, and it's very familiar. It's our response to God. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." So we're going to find out about self-control. I'm so sorry. So sorry. So in this chapter, Much Afraid, who has been changed into Grace and Glory, is going to visit the last mountain in the series. There was the mountain of pomegranates first, and then she and the shepherd visited all the previous 8 mountains, and this is the 9th mountain, and it's the mountain of self-control, and that's what we're going to find out about today. So there came a day soon after what? We'll have to go back and see. Let's see. It's just like when the Bible, when it says therefore, then you want to go back and see what it's there for. So they're leaving the mountain of meekness, and they sang the mountain song about the patient meek inheriting the earth. And so now it says there came a day soon after this when Grace and Glory was led to the last of the 9 mountains of spices, which was the mountain of Aloes. And as I've mentioned before, each of these is descriptive of the fruit of the Spirit, and the fruit of the Holy Spirit is love. And these are just aspects of the fruit of the Spirit, which is love. So love has all these beautiful aspects. And so this week it's being self-controlled by love. So let's let that self-control, let's not have it be like, oh, I must keep my self-control. Let it be guided by love. Let it come forth. If love rules it, it's going to come forth in sweetness. It's going to come forth in ease. It's not going to be a horrible fight. It's going to be love reigns. Love reigns here in self-control. So this was the last of the 9 mountains. This completed the whole circle of lovely peaks and brought her right back again to the edge of the mountain of pomegranates from which they had first started. This last mountain was, she thought, in some ways the most beautiful of them all. Although all 9 were so fair and wonderful, it was really difficult to favor one above the rest. Indeed, they all belonged together as the range of gardens in which the king grew his own wonderful spices. The mountain of aloes and the mountain of pomegranates possessed one feature, however, which did distinguish them in a special way from the other mountains in the chain. Between them lay a very quiet valley through which flowed a river of crystal clear water. Wow, that reminds me of a vision I had years ago of this river going through a beautiful valley. And I was standing by the river, and the grass was up to my knees. It was just a beautiful, lush valley. And I would think, anyone would think, why would you want to leave there? You want to stay there forever, right? So I was standing there near the river, and in the vision, I heard the voice of my beloved, Jesus. I heard his voice calling me from the river to come. And I flung myself in the river. I just flung myself. And it was rushing. It was clear as crystal. It was rushing. And I was in up to here. I had no control. So there was no self-control there, right? But there was controlled by love, because who called me into the river? Love did. Love's a person. It's Jesus, right? And so I knew at that time I was up to here, going at breakneck speed. That's what I remember about it. Breakneck speed. In other words, could break your neck, right? That's, the worldly, the earthly way of looking at it. But it was going so fast. But the thing is, I couldn't see where it was going. It looked to me like maybe up ahead, it might have been going down into a waterfall. That's the sense I had, but I couldn't see. I had to trust the voice, the one who called me into the river. I had to trust him for my being. I'll never forget that. So always be listening for his voice calling you. He may call you into the river. I've had a few other people say that they've been in that river underneath the water, and they could breathe underneath the water. And you say, well, Peggy, this is all a little bit mystical, a little bit too heavenly to be of any earthly good. Well, I guess that's me, right? But it isn't. No earthly good. He teaches us these things, and it is from heaven to earth, right? Yeah. He gives it to us. We bring forth that love. So let's learn about that love of self-control, that aspect. The mountain of aloes and the mountain of pomegranates possessed one feature that did distinguish them in a special way from the other mountains in the chain. Between them lay a very quiet valley which flowed that river of crystal I was talking about, clear water. This valley was, as it were, the stairway up to the very high places above. The river flowed across the valley between the two mountains after descending into a waterfall from cliffs high up on the mountain of Aloes. On the upper side of the quiet valley, above the river, was a path which led up and out of this world altogether, into the upper regions of the sky. At times, some of the inhabitants of those upper regions came down to the further banks of the river in order to welcome across to the other side those of the king's friends for whom the time for departure from the earth had come. Isn't that precious? Very precious. Very precious. On this occasion, however, it was not to the quiet valley between the mountains that the king led Grace and Glory, but to the mountain of aloes itself. Here grew the line aloe trees of self-control. They were very great trees, giants of strength and loveliness. Even the tallest of forest trees appeared as dwarfs. Their trunks were of immense thickness. Their branches spread out gloriously, shading an area vast enough to shelter a cathedral. And also, they were magnificently proportioned and were crowned with a gracefully vaulted roof of foliage so thick that not a drop of rain or hail could penetrate to the cool, shady depths beneath. Excuse me a second, someone's contacting me here. Kay Byer. Hi, Kay. Yeah, if anybody wants to chat, just hit the button and I'll hopefully see it. Love you, Kay. The trees didn't grow together, though, but they were widely spaced apart over the slopes of the mountain, each one rising like a noble and gracious temple in the shadowy depths of which chanted a melodious choir of birds. The spice yielded by these mighty trees was obtained by stripping off the perfumed bark from the great trunks of trees. The bark grew again so quickly that this stripping process could be repeated several times each year, and it always resulted in the further strengthening and growth of the trees. That's similar to the bushes that we were reading a couple of chapters earlier, where the bushes, the trunks of the bushes were cut with very sharp knives to let the sap come out, and that's what they used for healing. And this, the aloe trees or the aloes, they are used for healing, definitely healing for a lot of different things. And you can drink it for your gut too. It's healing as it goes down, as it coats your insides. But isn't that something, as the stripping of their bark? So that means like not only pruning, but just stripping off all the layers, because we are kind of like layers. We're kind of like onions that have a lot of layers. Let's see. Hi, Kay. But even so, they grew stronger, and this helped their growth. So let's see. I have a question here. So what did Grace and Glory think this mountain? Why did she think this was the most beautiful? Well, because it was the gateway to heaven. It was like the mountain of pomegranates that she started in, which was the mountain of love. So this mountain was the gateway to heaven. And what was the secret to the development of these magnificent trees of self-controlled love? That's a good way of saying it. These trees were self-controlled by love. Well, stripping its bark only made them stronger and more magnificent. It was like a temple of happiness, goodness, and strength. So it made them strong too. To sit down in the shade of one of these great temple-like trees was quite an awe-inspiring experience. But as soon as they were seated, Grace and Glory noticed that the squirrels were frisking about on the branches as gaily as children at play, and birds were nesting and twittering above her head. Indeed, whole families of happy creatures appeared to have made their homes in the all-embracing shelter of the tree. If at first it did remind her of the solemn beauty and worship of a cathedral or temple, she soon discovered that it was a temple of joy and lively happiness. She sat admiring, with almost reverential awe, the graciously proportioned boughs spreading overhead, so nobly strong and harmonious in their loveliness. It all made upon her an impression of goodness and beauty and strength made perfect, You know what it reminds me of, Kay, is the oak trees in Florida. What were they called? What were they called now? Those live oaks. That's it. Those great big oak trees. Yeah, I loved to go to those places and see those live oaks. Just loved them. Well, I'm having quite a time with my voice today. But I'm getting better and better. So presently from the other aloe trees on the slopes around her, she heard voices singing, as though invisible choirs were chanting together in mystic harmonies, a song of great joy and almost inexpressibly glorious melody. And this is what they were singing. Love has made a marriage feast, called each wedding guest, rich and poor, greatest and least, all at love's behest. Gathered here to celebrate the harvest of his joy so great. See the king's son with his bride, wooed and now possessed. Here behold her at his side, in his glory dressed. This is what he chose her for, to be his forevermore. Love has triumphed, love has won. Fruit from sorrow this. All he purposed, he has done. She is wholly his. All her heart and all her soul yielded to his full control. It reminds me of that dream I had. I'll tell it again. I had it last week, and it was of a great wedding banquet up on a high bluff, beautiful green bluff above the sea, and there were probably 100 people there. And the more I look back on it, because visions are eternal things, and so you can revisit them. And so thinking back on it, I think maybe they were all women guests at this particular wedding party. I could be wrong, but there were definitely about 100 people on this big U-shaped sets of tables. And I started at one end and I tried to find a seat, and every time I tried, someone would take it, and there was never a seat for me. And then at the end, I saw a bridal table be placed at the entrance of the U shape. And then there was Jesus. And then my place was next to him. And I think if any of us would have had that dream, it would have been the same. You would have been sitting there with him at the bridal table. But it was so precious to me that it was me and him. Him and me, him and I. So after the song had died away into silence, the king and his companion, Grace and Glory, sat quite silently looking out from the slope of the mountain onto the view spread out before them. There were the long, long chains of mountains and the far-reaching valleys which Grace and Glory had seen from the mountain of frankincense. Only on this mountain of aloes, the air seemed even clearer, and they could see further and more distinctly the far, far off places of the earth where love was not known and where he found no response, therefore, to his own love. Grace and Glory looked out over those low places for a long time. I think of you, Kay, when I'm reading this part, looking out on all those places where love was not known, where he didn't have a response to his own love. And that's where you're called to go. So Grace and Glory looked out over those low places for a long time. And then she turned in silence and looked at the king. She was wondering why he had said no more to her about those many, many valleys and the multitudes of wandering and fainting people who lived in them. Now, as she looked up into his face, with the question in her eyes which her lips did not frame, he turned on her a most radiant smile and said, "It's nearly time, Grace and Glory, but the plan is not quite ready for fulfillment." She thought it sounded as though he were laughing to himself over some happy secret. But after a moment, he changed the subject and said, "The trees on this mountain are the trees of self-controlled by love." That was their name, self-controlled by love. They are the most fully developed and most perfectly proportioned trees up here on the high places. And the secret of their development lies in the fact that their great roots spread out underneath far beyond the spread of their branches overhead. Each of these lovely giants sends at least some of its roots down into the waters of the river of life, which you see flowing through the valley, and which has come down from the very high places above. Self-controlled by love, repeated Grace and Glory thoughtfully. My Lord, I am always asking you questions which you answer so patiently and with such loving kindness. May I ask another? What is a self? Excuse me a minute, another person. Martha. Hi, Martha. Love you, dear. The Shepherd King says to Grace and Glory, a self or individual will is a marvelous mystery. For an individual will is really a part of the will and consciousness of the Creator himself, a part which he has made free so that it knows itself to be distinct in some lovely and mysterious way from all other individual wills, even from the will of the Creator who sent it forth. But it is so shaped and fashioned that it yearns back instinctively and with unquenchable longing for reunion with that from which it came forth. It is a capacity to love and is therefore a spark of the eternal fire of holy love. And so it can never find rest or real satisfaction until, like the leaping sparks which fall back into the fire, apart from which they cannot continue to exist, it finds the way back to the heart of God from whom it came forth. It is a ceaseless hunger and thirst which, turn whenever it will for satisfaction, can find none till it responds to the attracting pull of the eternal being or self from which it came forth. As long as it turns away from the source of origin, it's like a wandering star or a lost meteor until it falls back into the heart of love and yields up its own right to self-control. You see, that's important. If we want to grasp on ourselves to our right to our self-control. Of course, we have that right. We have our sovereign will. But remember what I said self-control was. It's knowing that we're in his firm grasp and that we can be at peace. We can have shalom. Nothing missing, nothing broken. A human spirit is indeed a capacity to love and to respond to love, and according to what it chooses or wills to love, so will its woe or blessedness be. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So another question: how did the king answer Grace and Glory's question about a self? Well, he told her that the individual will is part of the will and consciousness of the Creator, because He created us in His image, right? And He breathed in us His breath. So it can be individual, but yet long to be in union with the Creator. It longs for His love and to be part of His heart, right? That's so true. So true. So here is a song of love's origin that the king sang to Grace and Glory. Love is a glory and a pain. It's a burning fire, a flame of life which never again can cease to know desire. For love from the eternal flame came forth and bears his lovely name. See, we came forth and we bear his lovely name. Love kindled in a human heart is but a single spark of love divine, now set apart and launched into the dark. It no fulfillment knows, nor peace, till from its own self-love it cease. As every spark from love's own fire the self-same nature shares, it yearns back with intense desire to him whose name it bears. So leaps it forth in love and greets all other flaming souls it meets. Yes, oneness is the heart of love. To burn alone is despair. One with its source in God above and all men everywhere. It, burning heavenward, wears Christ's face and is on earth his dwelling place. You know, I love these poems. As soon as this song ended, the lovely but invisible choirs among the aloe trees again began to sing, but in a language which Grace and Glory could scarcely understand, which yet had something strangely and exquisitely familiar about it, as of a language heard long ago in earliest childhood, and then heard no more, and long since forgotten. Now, as she heard it again, it stirred in her heart sweet, haunting memories and such poignant nostalgia that the sweetness of it became almost unbearable. Presently, however, the music of the choirs became softer and sank to a low accompaniment, and then one voice, lovelier than any she had ever heard, save that of the king himself, began to sing alone. At first, here I go again, I'm going to cry. At first, she thought it was an angel, then perhaps the first mother of all men. But then, as she caught the words, she understood that it was the voice of the bride it herself, the bride of the King of Love. This is what she sang. I'm going to have to clear my eyes so I can read. My bonds are very, very strong. I never can go free. To holy love I now belong, and he belongs to me. And all the power of earth and heaven into my love-chained hands is given. Controlled by him, I have no might to let self plan or choose, but this control is my delight, and freedom I refuse. The King of love as Lord I own, and sit with him upon his throne. That's the end of chapter 17. Just full of poems, wasn't it? I guess it's because both these books have been leading up to this ending. And it is kind of mystical because she finally, got up to the very highest places with the king, and he's taken her around to all the mountains which described the aspects of the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, all of love's aspects. And it's all coming to a end. And I have read ahead in the next chapter. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's good. Yes. So the mountain of pomegranates was the first one. Let me see here. Yeah, pomegranates, and then the mountain of camphor. The mountain of pomegranates was the law of love. The mountain of camphor was of joy, the victory of love. The mountain of spikenard, of peace, was the atonement made by love. The mountain of saffron, long suffering, the suffering of love. The mountain of calamus, gentleness, the terror of love. The mountain of cinnamon, goodness, the judgment of love. The mountain of frankincense, faith, the response of faith to love. The mountain of myrrh, meekness, heaven is the kingdom of love. And then what we just read today, mountain of aloes, self-control, self-controlled by love. Well, that was kind of a short chapter, but I hope you liked it. And trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Yes, he will lead us. I remember, Kay, that you always taught us that you never went on a missionary trip until you had peace, right? You and Harold, and now yourself and you and your daughter and son-in-law, Jolene and Jeremy. When you all have peace, then you'll know. Yes, hallelujah. Well, I'm going to say goodbye for today, and I love you all. God bless you. If anyone has it on their hearts to give, I would greatly appreciate that. And I'll put the ways to give in the comments, and you can just click on it. And Kay, I love you, and I'll say goodbye. And Martha, love you, dear. I'll say goodbye for now, and see you soon.